Before we add text, one thing I just noticed, there's an error. The light is falling in this direction on the cow and the other direction for the figure. So let's flip her around real quick. I'm just going to go to edit. Oh, make sure she's selected. Edit, transform, flip horizontal. Boom. And now she's taking up way too much space. So I'm just going to move her over. Oh, that has the added effect of covering some of that horrible background. What if she's smaller? Let's do a transformation. Make sure you constrain the proportions so that, and that's the shift key to constrain those proportions, unless you've accidentally locked it like I have. We could do something like that. That's kind of interesting. I like the hand, though. What if we have her all the way in? Wish we had a little more of her up top to work with. I think that's too much. You know what? I think I'm going to leave her big, so let me hit, whoops, I undo that. And I'll just transform her down a little bit. Spacebar for the hand tool, shift key to constrain. All right. Put her about here. Okay, I think that has a good flow to it. We get this nice triangle that looks over the cow. Cow's looking back at her. We can use some text to push everything into place. So let's add some text. Let's clean this up a bit and then we'll add some text. We'll call this cow layer. We'll call this person. Blurred background. Black background we're not going to need when we turn this thing in. I'll throw that away, but for now I'll leave it. I'll just have the eyeball off. Let's go ahead and make a text layer. That's just the text tool, which is right here. And when you click with the text, you can put in something like moving on. I think that's funny. We'll go ahead and Control T. Now, text or vector, which is to say that they hold shift to constrain. Well, Control T. Text or vector, which means that you can resize these up and you won't get any kind of pixel damage going on. Don't resize up if you can help it, because that will cause damage. You'll see like weird blurs and garbage everywhere. So but on vectors, you can resize up as much as you want. On pictures, don't resize up if you can help it. So I'm going to grab the text tool, highlight this. I don't know what kind of ink free. I don't want that. I'm going to pick, I don't know, let's say something kind of fun, but still legible. Now, I'm of the mind that text should either be legible, you can read it easily, or text should be completely illegible and just a design option. But if you have semi-legible text, it's just annoying. You're sitting there trying to see what's happening, and you're never going to because it's not entirely legible. I'm just going to do, I saw a good one before I accidentally exited out. Kind of like, as I get picky, let's just stick with impact because that will, let's do this. Moving on to MJC. No, we'll just leave it moving on. So I'm going to use impact so that we can do one more layer mask on here because notice we've only got 2 of the 3 required layer masks. We have enough layers, but not enough layer masks. So I'm going to grab another copyright-free image. Maybe, oh, we've got a nice blue, but the sky's blue. An orange would be good then because orange will be the opposite of blue. This has kind of a brown-orange color to it. That could work very nicely. This has a subtler yellow to it. This is a nice field. Let's do the, let's do the dirt. Bring it on up. First, open in Photoshop as a new tab. Bring it over to copy. Then grab the layer. You know, if you don't want to do that too, you can right-click on the layer in the empty space, and you can do duplicate layer, and you can target a different document entirely. Boom. So now, all the way back over here, we have the duplicated layer of, it just happened to be called background. Pretty cool, right? Why do I have the text? So I'm going to turn that off for a second, see what's going on. I have the text above the cow. I'm going to keep this at the top here. So I got the text, and I've got this nice sky. And I've got this good dirt, which will have a nice texture, all kinds of fun stuff. So I've mentioned clipping masks before, and it's like water coming down a waterfall and hitting a rock. If you look at the top of the rock, you'll only see the water pooling there, not the water that's pouring off. So everything that doesn't hit this will just stop. That's a weird way to put it, right? That's just the best one that I have in this case. So what I'm going to do is this. I'm just going to make it so you can see it. And I will do that under layer mask, and clipping mask. Oops, sorry. Layer, they moved it out here, that's fine. Create clipping mask. And I had the wrong layer selected, so nothing's happening. Control Z. I need the topmost layer selected. Layer, clipping, create clipping mask. Boom. Now notice that this has a little arrow and it's indented in. It's hitting the text below it, so we can see it there. What does this look like? I kind of like the blue. What do you think? Bright blue? It's a little illegible in a couple of places, but we can take care of that easily enough. There's another way to create and remove clipping masks. You can always remove clipping masks by clicking on the layer that is clipping to the layer below it. Go up to Layer and Release Clipping Mask. But you can also create and move it by just holding down the Alt key, that's Option key on the keyboard, and moving between two layers and clicking. That will allow you to make or remove a layer mask, or I'm sorry, a clipping mask. And I like that. I think that's better. All right, so like I said, this is a little hard to read in a couple of places. Well, let's look at a couple of techniques for fixing that up. First, let's save. Things are going well. Control S. So I'm going to go over to, not the adjustment layer this time, but with the, wrong area selected. With the text selected, I'm going to go to the effects layer and look at all of these wonderful options. And these are all under blending options. Boom. So under blending options, we have some super useful stuff. We're going to get back to what this blend if is later in the semester. It's a really powerful way of masking, but it involves blending modes. So when we get to the many, many blending layers, we'll talk about this and how all that goes. We're going to skip that for now. We're going to pop down to stroke. And now there are a couple things to know about these. You can add multiple strokes. You can delete strokes if you don't want them. Boom. You can change the order of these so one stroke can be above the other. On shadows, if we were to do a drop shadow, we have a global light point, which means all the drop shadows on board will be controlled by one menu, which is nice. Or you can use a non-global light, which means that they will not be done. So these are kind of the two default ways of making it more legible. So let's see what those two ways are, or what those two effects look like. Right, click on the stroke. Notice that it's changing it. You can turn it on or off, but if you click on things that will allow you to get to them, it will also automatically select it, which is annoying. But I'm just going to click it to get to it. I'm going to increase the size, and notice that maybe it's a little dark, maybe it's a little hard to see. I don't want it to be on the inside. I want it to go outward. There we go. Now I can increase the size as much as I want, and it will, well, within reason, 250 pixels seems to be the default. That will let me bring it up. Voila. I can see it now. You can set any of the blending modes that you want. Since I have black, you're not really going to see that effect. You can change the color, though, to something else, like red, which I think is looking pretty hideous, but there you go. Now we can do something like multiply with the red, and then you see like this weird red effect. I'm not digging that too much, so I think I'm going to be really boring. In this case, I'm just going to use black, which is zeros across the board on all those guys, ignoring the CMYK, which of course has to mix it in. Do it on the outside. Bring it up. You can also do it in the center, which means that half will go out, half will go in. Sometimes it's useful, sometimes it's not. I'm just going to do outside, moving on. And I'm going to use the fill type. I'll just use color. You can do gradient, which is interesting. In some cases, it makes it a little harder to read. And as I was saying, like I don't want illegible text unless you want it to be a non-legible element. I don't like it half and half, but that's just me. It's set to color instead. Leave it to blending mode normal, 100% opacity. You can decrease and increase the opacity of it. I'm just going to go 100%. Looks cartoony, but for demonstrative purposes, I think that works pretty well. I'm also going to drop in a shadow. So drop shadow, boom. Remember, click on it to get to the text. You've got styles, for example. You have to click right on it. Blending options is another example. Click right at drop shadow, got to click on it. You can also clear it out by hitting delete. If it deletes it forever, what's the way to get that back? You got to reset it. Control Z. What is the way to get it back if you don't accidentally press delete. Otherwise, you have to go to effects, drop shadow, it will put it back in. It's really annoying. I think the delete button is a dumb idea in this case. Clear would have been way more useful. Okay, so multiply, as we know, is a good way to do darkening. I'm going to make the opacity kind of high for just a minute, just so I can see where it's positioned. If I move distance, you'd see that it's going mostly straight down. It's because it's controlled by an angle. Changing this angle will move it in a different position. So let me come here. Moving on. Spread will make it kind of fuzzier and bigger. Size just makes it kind of bigger in general. So if I have less spread, it's less fuzzy. The bigger it gets, it's just blurred out. Oh, that's backwards, isn't it? Spread seems to be the size expansion, and size seems to be the spread blurriness. Well, that's fun. All right, well, there you have it. Play with these levers and you'll see immediately what they do. I'm going to just lower the opacity on that. And it's on multiply, so it's not quite universal. I actually don't think we need very much at all. I don't think we even need it that far away. Let's actually have no spread on it, zero size on it, and we'll just have the distance, the angle coming in a little pop just to follow the shadows of the image. So now these have a little bit of oomph, so it's quite legible. Tell it okay. All right, so we've got some text, but what if this is too boring for us? What if we wanted to move around a little bit? No problemo. Notice that if we highlight it with the text tool, we have an option here called create warped text. And if I click on that, boom, I have some default styles that are pretty common, such as an arc, and that has a bend to it. I have a lower arc only, which is fun because you could like do something like this, moving on. Horizontal distortion, vertical distortion, all that good stuff. If you ever want to reset on one of these windows, just hold down the Alt key, that's option on the Macintosh, and then it will turn the cancel to reset, so you can zero everything out. You have some other stuff like a seashell shape, the upper shell shape, a fish shape, which I think is hilarious and rarely useful, but always fun. You can fisheye it, which is a kind of lens where it's large, and the lens would make it larger in the center and then kind of distort it out and smush it on the other side. I'm just going to do I think a lower arc in this case. Okay. I'm going to move this with the move tool. Moving on. Here we go. All right, this is looking all right. So last thing I think for this demonstration I'm going to do is show you how to make a frame using masks. Because what if you just want to use a solid color and you're just happy with these two things? You're like, well, I need another mask to make this work. You could just do a frame. So that's easy enough. First save, because things are going well. Oh, and keep in mind that this distortion to the text is an effect that can be edited. So if you get your text tool, key on the keyboard, and click on it, you could go to the text to distort and notice it saved it. If you reset it to 0 manually, it will go away. So you can only really have one of those going on unless you use smart objects, which we'll talk about next week. Okay, and your effects will appear below it. You can turn those on and off if you want to see what they'd look like with only one or the other. You play around with those too. That's fun. All right, so what if you want to have a frame around this so that you can, but you also want to have like another mask so you can meet the requirements of the assignment? Well, I'll add a frame in the next video, just so that if you want to come back to it, you won't have to fast forward through everything. So I will see you in just a moment.